Jim's coming up. So let me just do the introductions and start with Charlie Atkins. He's the Director of Development of the Wyoming Industrial Innovation and Invention Park, called iPark for short. Working with a sister company, Wyoming Wyoming iPark, being created on about 15,000 acres of Sheridan. And one is established to an integrated, sustainable, high-value-added, multi-product industrial and technology development park with ultra-low environmental impacts, targeting near net zero emissions to commercialize both existing and newly developed cold products. So this is going to be carbon to products, different than the CO2 products that we hear from some of the other folks. The iPark is envisioned that it also includes strong research and development capabilities that will help establish partnerships and help build that sort of technology innovation ecosystem. So we'll hear a little bit about that. And as they work to explore and invent ways to produce what we call high value density products while improving upon the existing products, so the initial first products that they start producing. And also concurrently with that, Charlie will talk a little bit about workforce development that's going on there. Charlie has an MS in economics from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and he's probably not mentioned here, but he's one of the first fintech developers, having developed some fintech software early in his career. It's one of the companies that he's founded and runs, so actually a serial entrepreneur as well. So. Next, Jason Beggar, Executive Director of the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority. Everybody knows who he is. Previously worked with 2 members of the Montana Congressional Delegation in Washington, D.C. And while in Washington, staff 2002 Farm Bill debate and later the Energy and Water Appropriation Subcommittee, focusing on Bureau of Reclamation water projects and Department of Energy Office of Fossil Energy Funding. So highly qualified for discussion today. In 2006, Jason accepted the position of Petroleum Association of Wyoming before becoming the manager of government affairs for Rio Tinto Energy America, which then was acquired and became Cloud Peak Energy, and he started at the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority in July 2015. Jason has a BA in History from Montana State University, Billings, and a Master's in Business Administration from the University of Denver. Thank you, Jason. Next, I'll introduce Jim. Jim is U.S. Renewable Group's managing partner. So Jim has operational control of the firm's day-to-day activities. But prior to joining that firm, he started his career as a public power banker with First Boston Municipal Finance Group in New York. And while First Boston, he told us, it was a cold day, he traveled to LA, it was 80 degrees, he decided I'm going to stay in LA. So he worked with Southern California Public Power Authority, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Washington Public Power Supply Systems, and several other West Coast municipal utilities and investor-owned utilities. So a strong understanding of how the different utilities work and the issues and challenges. And also as a private equity investor, he worked with Prudential's Private Capital Group and Allen Company. And also as an entrepreneur, he started and ran and invested in the following companies: Stamps.com. Anybody buy your stamps and art there? Founder and CEO of Spoke Software Inc. Founder and CEO of Archive Inc. Founder and CEO of Practice Technologies. Investor and board member of Nano H2O Inc. Founder and board member of OH Energy. And founder of what it is, man. Mike, I can echo you. I feel like an underachiever. So it's very knowledgeable people to talk about innovation and how to do that. So he's also active in the management of Fulcrum Bioenergy Inc., which is a municipal solid waste fuels, Solar Reserve, which is doing concentrated solar power with storage, Common Assets, LLC, SET, Set Technology, UMDH, and a bunch of others. So that. He has an MBA from the Anderson School of UCLA, and a BA in Philosophy from Colorado College. So Tom, you're going to introduce, so it's okay if I just say, sorry. And with that, I invite Jason to come speak first. We're going to do a little different order now. We get Tom speaking, and we organize a little bit different. Jason, it's all yours.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit today about kind of a platform for a lot of this innovation in Wyoming and kind of what the state's doing and, you know, kind of this bigger holistic view of how we're trying to do things within the state. And then, you know, also introduce folks to the Integrated Test Center as well, because that really is why the Infrastructure Authority decided to focus on these issues during this conference. It is, you know, we're building an asset.
Speak up a little bit.
You know, microphone. Sorry.
Thank you.
I told it now. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So, you know, the state has invested in this great testing asset, but unless you have the pipeline of technologies and sort of this greater ecosystem between promoting technology, scaling up and spinning off, you know, the ITC really won't be utilized to its fullest potential. So, in thinking of that and then looking at how do we do all of those things, you know, this financing and you know, pulling together the support for these projects really is a critical piece. So, you know, they've got to really kind of go hand in hand. I won't go into the Infrastructure Authority. You know, most people know who we are. We're not an agency. We're an authority. So it does allow us to actually operate like a private business in a lot of senses. You know, we can own projects, we can develop, we can push, we can finance. But you know, we are doing it on behalf of the state of Wyoming. So a lot of questions you get is, what is the Wyoming strategy when it comes to R&D? And, you know, and this just isn't the Infrastructure Authority, it's also, you know, our partners at the university, and Business Council, and all others. But it's, you know, what can we do to commercialize these technologies to ensure the long-term viability of Wyoming's natural resources? You know, when you look at these broader debates over climate change and low carbon energy, those sort of things. Well, if coal goes away, that is probably about 25% of the state's revenue. You know, we don't have any state income taxes, our property taxes are really low. So if carbon really is the culprit, what can we do to ensure coal and our fossil energy resources continue to be used, but yet under this carbon-constrained world? So that really is our focus and what we're trying to do there. But, you know, how do we do that? You know, the Infrastructure Authority, you know, it's Sarah and myself and, you know, our board, and, you know, we've got a lot of people helping us out, but we're just one small piece of that. And so, you know, while we're not officially linked, we do have great relationships. You know, School of Energy Resources, Dr. Workman's here on their behalf. You know, they're the university. They do a lot of the hard science and, you know, a lot of the international relationships with like-minded labs and universities and, you know, proving these ideas up. And underneath that, you know, they've got another number of entities. You know, the Carbon Management Institute, looking at geologic sequestration, Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, identifying those oil fields within the state that are good candidates for EOR and you know, all the infrastructure that would be necessary to move, you know, that CO2 around the oil. The Wyoming Integrated Test Center, you know, that next scale up of pilot scale demonstration projects. Dow has been mentioned, you know, kind of the business systems and all that support of creating new industries. You know, the Carbon X Prize, while not necessarily, actually not all affiliate or a piece of Wyoming, but they're a great partner in helping us both get the ITC up and off the ground, but moving this carbon industry forward. So here's the big thing. You know, what is the ITC? What is Integrated Test Center? So what it is a post-combustion flue gas research facility. So what we do is after all flue gas, the exhaust gas from that power plant, it goes through the scrubbers, bank houses, it's fully regulated flue gas. Before it goes up the stack, we're diverting about 5% of the power plant's emissions into research base. And this isn't a bricks and mortar facility. You know, we're not building a laboratory. The university has laboratories, NETL, National Carbon Capture Center. We don't need to duplicate that. So our test bays are outside.
And each space has flue gas hookup, has water, has wastewater disposal, has electricity. You bring your apparatus in, it gets hooked into the system, you run it for however many hours you need to do, gather the data you need to do, you know, make tweaks, modify, you know, test it, and then once you're finished, you remove it, and then that space opens up for the truck. So, this is really, it is a testing facility, not a laboratory facility. So, it's a very simple design, but that simple design gives us a lot of benefits. One is we have a lot of flexibility. You know, we don't have a building to worry about, well, is this a system that, you know, is 60 feet high and, you know, a narrow footprint, or is it a very big footprint but, you know, only one story high? You know, we give you this sandbox to play in, and so long as you stay within those boundaries, you know, there's a lot of flexibility as to what sort of technology to propose. But also, it's really flexible in ways where 10 years down the road, if we need to do something different, I mean, who knows what that technology would look like or what that host site would do, we can adapt the existing infrastructure to meet that. So it's worked out really well that way. And then also a simple design is kept our capital construction costs really low, because you know, our entire construction budget is just a little under $15 million. So $50 million is a lot of money, but in the world of R&D and facility construction, it's a small amount. So we've been able to do a lot with the amount of money that we've been getting. So who are our partners? The state of Wyoming stepped up and said we're going to commit $15 million to do this, but of course it wasn't free money. There were some strings attached. One is we needed to find at least 25% private cost share. Did a little bit better, $6 million. So we got $5 million from Tri-State, $1 million from NRUCA. Basic Electric is providing the host site and a lot of other in-kind contributions such as construction management, you know, our dry port power station. The Infrastructure Authority is the managing entity, but our other utilities, both Black Hills, actually Black Hills, they donated a transformer over the summer that was kind of one of those things that was off budget, but realized that we needed about $500,000 transformer, and we would have figured it out. So Black Hills stepped up and donated that. And then Pacific Corps has provided technical expertise. You know, they are a strong proponent of technology. You know, and Andy was talking, you know, they posted their project at one of their sites. So they've got experience in R&D, but they're also very interested in finding those next technologies. So they have really good people in-house that review these things, and they've donated their time as well. And then the XPRIZE Foundation is that first 10 that's going to come in. So, you know, what are our goals? You know, sort of mentioned moving these technologies forward, but really looking at the CO2. Right now, at best, it's something that is just, it's an exhaust gas. It's something we just throw away. It goes in the air. At worst, it's a liability, but can we turn that into an asset? You know, very low hanging fruit is DOR, but very high value products such as carbon fiber or others, you know, also that CO2 could have a lot of value. And another great thing is that it really positions Wyoming as a leader on these things. It's kind of saying that, you know, pointing out the problem without coming up with a solution is called complaining. So, you know, Wyoming is stepping up and saying, hey, we want to be part of this group that is trying to find these solutions. So how do we do that? And I think, you know, that's kind of my background is I'm not an engineer. I come more from the public policy side of things. But we need to start talking about energy technology in layman's terms and things in ways that the average public can understand. And the best way is technology. We see it all around us. You know, look at where we've come with just data storage. You know, not over the last 50, 60 years, but just in the last 10 years. You know, look at phones. That's something that's been in the last really 20 years. We're carrying a big brick phone around to a smartphone that is not only a phone, but has replaced, half a dozen or more other devices. And every day as new apps and new things are coming out, being developed, that little piece of computing power is doing more and more and more. And energy technology is the same way. The power plants and the things that we're doing today is drastically different than the power plants that came online in the 1960s. So we need to think about that. But the great thing is that there's an incredible track record with emissions controls and technologies. This isn't just a concept, an idea that we can reduce emissions from power plants. Been doing it for a long time. If you look at from 1970, when the first Clean Air Act amendments were, or I guess the first Clean Air Act came out, we're one of those criteria pollutants. Nobody really talks about acid rain anymore. Why? Because a technology solution was developed to address environmental concern. And so let's quit talking about carbon as a political football, but looking at it as more of an engineering challenge. And what do we need to do to move that forward? So that really brings us into our relationship with the X Prize Foundation. And so, most people are aware of the X Prize Foundation. They do these incentive competitions to solve big engineering challenges. And so the one that we've been working with along is the Carbon X Prize. So how can we award prize, I guess, how can we find teams that are best able to pull that CO2 out of the flue gas stream and convert it into some other marketable product? So we'll go into all the various layers of that competition, but right now there's 23 teams from 6 countries that are vying for 10 final spots. 5 that will come test coal flue gas at the ITC starting next year, and 5 that will test at a natural gas facility in Canada. But they are really pushing this technology development, and it's so much more than just the apparatus that will convert that CO2. It's a whole business case. What is the market for your product? If you build a lot of something, is it going to flood the market, and your economic model just not going to work anymore? So they're making these teams really think about the whole business plan and how to make these technologies a reality. So here's kind of an overview of the test facility itself. On the right, the picture taken probably about 6 weeks ago. There's been quite a bit of work done since then, but you kind of see the small test bays there on the bottom half of that picture. That's where the X-Prize competition will take place. Kind of the upper center, the picture on the right, there's a building there. It's a quad-wide modular trailer. There's offices, bathrooms, kind of a small kitchenette, swing space. Since it does get 20 below zero in the winter, a place for folks to come in and actually, do some work. But the bulk of the facility itself is outside. So each one of these 5 small test bays will be able to host a project of about 0.4 megawatts. X-Prize will move in this spring. They will be there to about mid-2020. Once that competition is done, they will vacate the site and they'll be available for new testing entities. Immediately on the south side of the power plant is the large test bay, and that really is the place where we could test pilot scale. There's a lot of flexibility built into that particular portion of the ITC, where we could host 2 pilot projects up to 20 megawatts in total. We could do 120 megawatt, we could do 2 10s, a 10 or 2 and an 18, or however that works. But that really is the place to take those smaller scale and take it to that next step. One, proof of technology, but also the economics, and give utilities the comfort level in building a larger scale, full-scale project. So, kind of where we are with the project and what our next steps is, we're scheduled to be completed in December this year. We're a little bit behind schedule, but that's okay because X-Prize isn't moving in until spring anyway. We had an issue with some valves that didn't come in when they were supposed to, and as our on-site guy at the base would say, it's like, it's not like I can just run to Home Depot and get these things. So, here's what it is. Yeah, it says that we're on budget. Actually, we're a little bit on, looks like we're going to be a little bit under budget, which is awesome for a government project. We're pretty happy with that. We finalized our large test bed researchers. We've got that facility. We have got a lot of interest from various entities, and so we're reviewing those technologies, and hopefully we can find something that'll work there. Last spring, we did an energy and technology showcase with the University of Wyoming to look at what's happening in Wyoming, and so we'll kind of continue to look at these technologies and what we can do to promote them in the state. You know, Endow's moving forward. Well, we're not a party to that. You know, we are pulled in from time to time to provide them some insight. You know, exploring those opportunities that exist currently for funding. You know, DOE within the last 6 weeks has released a couple different very large funding announcements that seem like they would tie in well with what we're trying to do there. You know, but also looking at some different philanthropic organizations. You know, if some of these entities are really focused on low carbon solutions, well, if you want to make the biggest splash, you know, finding carbon capture technologies and funding that is going to really help move the needle on that. So exploring some of those opportunities, but also, you know, looking internationally. You know, JCOL, which is a Japanese trade group, was in Wyoming a couple of weeks ago, very interested in, you know, not only buying Wyoming coal, but proving the technologies to work at. And then, as Roxanne mentioned this morning, the International Carbon Capture Test Center Network, while we're not an operating facility and therefore eligible, we have had these conversations, and we're very hopeful that once we are up and running, that we can join that group. So, you know, this is a facility that isn't just for the benefit of Wyoming. There's also larger global implications, and hopefully we can be a part of that larger R&D community. So there's a lot happening. Things are moving forward, and, you know, kind of what we really hope is the conversations from today and tomorrow kind of help fill that pipeline as we look to the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Questions? We've got one speaker, so we got to make it quick. Any questions for Jason? Anybody want to donate money to the ITC cause?
Just want to give me money.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much.
Tom Thompson's going to come and speak, and he talked about some of the things that he'll talk about, their innovation activities and their approach to innovation. Follow up in his presentation today. Tom?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And thanks once again for indulging me and allowing me to chat with you this afternoon. So this morning we talked about emerging technologies, and obviously I spoke a bit about our carbon capture technology and the economic value that we bring to this. And I think I also mentioned during my presentation this morning that over the last few years we've spent an awful lot of time pursuing and being approached by CO2 conversion technologies in pursuit of creating products of a high net value, which is very much consistent with the approaches of XPRIZE. And the approach that we're espousing is we're in violent agreement with the Wyoming ITC and how they want to proceed and accelerate the maturation of these markets. So what I wanted to share with you today is some of the work that we've been doing on the carbon conversion piece and a couple of case studies around that as well, because we think that this is the approach that will help to really accelerate and mature this entire conversation. So we talked a little bit about this morning, our CO2 capture piece. So for the purposes of this discussion, let's assume that you folks are in the same place as a number of the CO2 conversion technologies that we're working with, and that this has been demonstrated at a scale that people will accept as being able to scale up to larger industrial environments and an economic model that will allow CO2 conversion technologies to create a marketplace. So in our opinion, and just a little bit of background here, so I think there was 37 carbon XPRIZE applications that were received. The number was initially 27, is now dwindled down to 23, as Jason has mentioned. And as a partner of XPRIZE and Carbon XPRIZE, we've seen pretty much all of those 27 submissions. And in addition to those 27 submissions, we've been approached by over 30 CO2 conversion technology companies in the last year about the discussion around the marriage of capture and conversion, what they do, what those markets look like, and so on and so forth. So with the benefit of that experience and interaction over the last 2 or 3 years, we have some thoughts that we'd like to share with you. So first of all, it is an extremely positive note. We think that this whole area of endeavor has great promise. We really believe that. The range of solutions that we've seen so far, in our opinion, are extremely broad and very exciting, and we're excited about them from an economic perspective. We believe that over time, that CO2-derived products that will utilize CO2 emissions and may, in some instances, actually displace existing products that have a higher GHG footprint. We believe that based on the work that we've done over the last few years, that that's a realistic statement and a tangible goal. And many of the ones that we've seen may actually end up being cheaper to produce than the more traditional legacy products. And I'll give you a couple of case studies of this in a moment. And one of the real values of this is that these technologies also use less scarce resources such as water, arable land, etc. So there's multiple benefits, environmentally, practically, and financially, that goes into this industry. So our approach when we're talking to companies about possible marriage and helping them accelerate to market is that we're looking for innovative approaches that economically can utilize CO2 and convert it to a product of a high net value, whatever that product might be. The objective is to marry those technologies with our economic CO2 capture system. And given our corporate finance backgrounds, because most of us are actually bankers and corporate finance guys, not necessarily engineers, we also work with these companies to help develop the business and the business case for these companies and their products. And that includes a strategy to attack the market. And when we develop this overall methodology, our number one objective is to create businesses and technologies that can drive stockholder value. What we want to do is we want to get away from fines and penalties and tariffs to encourage the adoption of GHG solutions, and we actually want to be able to have an environment where people can invest and expect to enjoy a reasonable rate of return in a reasonable period of time. So when we're looking at this stuff, we have a number of items that fit within our category, what we call our criteria. So number one is the product, whatever the product ultimately is, it must be a drop-in solution for an existing application. So if you're trying to sell something to the tire industry, what you basically want them to satisfy themselves is that product is replacing something else, but it can be easily dropped in because otherwise you're not going to have an engaged customer. We're looking for products that have a global market. We're looking for products that have the lowest level of power requirements possible, and obviously that's a bit of a challenge in the CO2 conversion space, but we like a few instances of what we see. So power requirements, obviously, the lower the better. It goes without saying that if the solution is already advanced beyond the bench, that's a good thing, but we don't discount that opportunity just because it's at the bench scale. But intuitively it makes sense that the further along it is, the closer to market it possibly can be. Making a profit is not enough. So revenue, less expenses, bringing it to the market, and having a small little round of EBITDA is not going to encourage the deployment and procurement of these CO2 conversion technologies. They need to be able to demonstrate that they can scale and show reasonable stockholder return as a result. If we're going to ask companies to adopt CO2-related products that are drop-in, we also need to make sure that we satisfy the end customer that the GHG footprint is lower than the existing products, because from a communications perspective, they can speak to what they've embraced in the area of social responsibility, which is a big selling tool in a lot of these environments. And obviously, products that can sequester more CO2 have the edge over those that can't. So we can collect 600,000 tons per year of CO2 for a CO2 to methane application. We want to make sure that that methane application can accept most of that 600,000 tons per year of CO2. In terms of CO2 conversion technologies, we encourage them, and we actually spoke at the Carbon X Prize Summit in New York in June on these 4 key points, to really focus on the entire research, development, and commercialization roadmap, including the intellectual property piece, because a well-planned execution of this can, in some instances, help to reduce that pathway. And if you don't review and consider various items along that way, then you can have missteps which will cost you time, money, and perhaps negatively impact your ability to get to market at all. A techno-economic analysis of the carbon utilization technology is very, very important. Scott actually presented a slide, I believe, in his presentation earlier with the techno-economic analysis of his process. And so we can all get really, really revved up about technology, and the technology can do this and it can do that, and it's a marvelous thing. But if there's not an economic argument for that, it's a waste of time. So our approach is, when we get approached by somebody, we obviously want to have an understanding of how their technology works, run that by scientists and engineers that could give us a high-level opinion whether it's at all feasible. But once we get to that place, we set that notion aside for a moment and really look at the business case. Is there a market for the product that they're ultimately trying to bring to market? Will somebody buy it at the price point that we need to be respectful of, given some of the economic considerations apropos of CapEx and OpEx? And so it's the marriage of that analysis on the technical side and the economic side that's vitally important. Financial modeling and engineering for carbon utilization companies is then the next step. And what we mean by that is that we have to get into detailed modeling of that process to see whether, in fact, we can create an environment that will generate stockholder interest and stockholder value. And even in cases where an inventor or an entrepreneur comes to us and says, we're making ABC product and we think that this customer will buy it at this price and so on, with some financial modeling and engineering, we may find out that that's not the case, but there may be another vertical that that entrepreneur and inventor had not considered that makes a hell of a lot more sense. And actually one of the case studies that we have, we'll speak to that a little bit further. And the designing of carbon credit methodology at the very earliest point is vitally important. So what we're talking about now is the whole notion of having a product that you can ultimately sell on the carbon market. That methodology takes a long time to get approved, and only when it's approved will that product or project be one that could actually have those credits traded. And the more of those products and methodologies that are approved, the more mature cap and trade will become. In 2006, I was introduced to a division of Cantor Fitzgerald called CO2e.com, when the whole conversation about cap and trade and so on was starting to really rev up. And they created an entire division around the whole cap and trade process. When we closed our Series A round in 2008, I promised them that when we did it, I would get back to them because I wanted for them to be an intimate part of the development of the business case. Within 2 years, Cantor Fitzgerald shut that entire division down because there were no carbon markets. And it continued to be somewhat immature because there aren't a lot of projects that can be going through that area. So bringing in a company like Carbonomics at the very early stages to develop that methodology on a project-by-project basis is vitally important. And in fact, what we're trying to do is work on methodologies that take broader considerations like CO2 to a liquid, CO2 to a solid, CO2 to an energy storage place. So if those larger methodologies can get approved under the CDM, then as specific projects and technologies come to market, we can try to fit them in those broader methodologies and perhaps hotwire those approvals. So these are things that we're working on. So as I mentioned, we've got a couple of case studies. So of the 50 some odd CO2 conversion opportunities that we've been introduced to over the last number of years, we're really, really excited about 4 or 5, for all the reasons that we just discussed. A couple of them are actually round 2 competitors. A couple of them are other companies that we've been introduced to outside of the enterprise competition. The first one is Catalytic Innovations. So Catalytic Innovations is actually a round 2 competitor within the carbon enterprise. This is where we met them. It's a technology that's come out of Yale University, and basically it was presented to us as a CO2 to methanol, maybe CO2 to ethanol, and full disclosure, the guys that developed this, they've taken ultimately alcohol from this, which is 200 proof, but they actually drank it throughout university. So it's pretty good testing ground for it. We took a look at that solution and we went through the financial modeling exercise that we described. And we said, you know, we don't think there's really a market for the CO2 to methanol. Kind of like the CO2 to ethanol. A lot of ethanol stuff out there, but we think we can build a case for that because it's non-grain based, there's no arable land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But with the combination of our 2 solutions, we can actually convert this into a 200 proof undenatured alcohol with applicability to all food and industrial uses, particularly distilled beverages and fragrances and cosmetics. So this solution has got lower GHG emissions than grain-based alcohol, and again, uses much less water and no arable land. And in this particular case, what the example we use is the marvelous green base for the creation of fragrances and perfume. The fragrance and the cosmetic industry gets their backside kicked for being environmentally unfriendly. And a lot of them, or all of them, will publicly speak to the fact that they're big into the sustainability push. But there's a great line that I heard a long time ago that says, your actions speak so loud I can barely hear what you're saying. So, as I was sharing with Jim, in a previous life, or maybe still an existing life, I did some work in the fashion industry. And as a result of that, I know people in the fragrance and the cosmetic area, and we actually have an offtake agreement now in principle for this product with the world's largest privately owned fragrance and cosmetics manufacturer. They do about $12 billion a year in revenue, because what they want to do is transition off their traditional source of alcohol and move as quickly as they possibly can to this marriage of CO2 and this process to allow them to go to this 200 proof undenatured CO2-based alcohol product, which is obviously will be globally impactful, have a marvelous communications appeal, and based on the numbers that we've been able to demonstrate, extremely profitable as well. So that in principle offtake agreement is already in place. From the economic perspective, the one thing I didn't do is, so they're talking to us about scalability. So we gave them a model that if we were to take a 100 megawatt coal-fired plant, take it off the grid, and there's lots of them around, utilize, so burn coal, create energy, but instead of using that energy for electricity, that would use that energy to produce this ethanol and alcohol, which gives the investor community in a regular financing model of an annualized return of about 30%. The target price is the same as existing food and industrial grade grain-derived alcohol. Our carbon footprint would be about 10% lower. The process is highly scalable. You're no longer subject to feedstock swings from grain. This equipment is relatively simple, and obviously this would qualify for carbon credit projects following the methodology that we already have in place. So where we are with that right now is, and this has moved quite quickly. We introduced this to the company through a former senior vice president of Estee Lauder in May. We met with the senior executive team, including their lead technical people from Paris, France in July. We provided them with samples last month. I was actually supposed to be in New York on this project on Tuesday, which is one of the reasons why I delayed getting back to Jason, whether I could attend this week or not. We put that off for a couple of weeks. But we expect to have agreement on offtake with some projections on volume increases done before the end of 2017 and start the production process in 2018. We're really excited about that. My second and the last case study that I'll give you is a non-carbon XPRIZE competitor. That was actually introduced to us by our Cap and Trade Bureau, Seth Baruch at Carbonomics. We've been working with them for quite some time. And this is basically a product that takes CO2 and converts it to carbon-based products. And there's all kinds of technologies that have tried to do this at various levels of success. So again, we spent a fair bit of time with these folks on the technical side and on the economic side. And in addition to that, one of our key coalition partners has large research capabilities and some interest in this space. So based on input that we've been able to generate from our third-party coalition partner, our own internal analysis and some engineering analysis, so on and so forth, what we've been able to identify is that this product actually can operate in a relatively low power and heat environment using an inexpensive catalyst. The product is a true drop-in for carbon usage, and that preliminary third-party results from the testing that I provided to you indicate that the product is better than traditional carbon black, and at the same price with obviously a much lower GHG footprint. And the work that these folks are doing, we believe, based on the introductions that we've had in Laramie, is completely compatible with the work that's being done at the Wyoming School of Energy's Carbon Engineering Center of Excellence. And there's a great deal of interest on the part of all parties to get together to advance those discussions. So our preliminary modeling of this process shows a potential 6-year annualized return on equity for, again, a 100 megawatt plant equivalent of about 49%. And that return assumes a 25% royalty payment and still allows for an EBITDA margin of about 33%. The projected return to demonstration investors is fairly significant, and obviously there's a significant reduction in GHG footprint compared to traditional derived carbon black. There are other higher margin products that we're actually even more excited about in the form of carbon nanofibers and carbon nanotubes that are structurally stronger than legacy products and will result in replacement materials that are structurally better and that this can sequester CO2. And they cost no more, and we would argue somewhat less than traditional products. And so, but here's a practical reason why we're really excited about this. So this carbon nanotubes, you could think of a carbon nanotube, as I understand it, as being a marvelous replacement for rebar. So instead of having rebar in the middle of cement columns, you have carbon nanotubes in the middle of cement columns. If this product was available in the early 70s when the World Trade Center was constructed, the trade towers would never have come down, because the level of heat that was thrown off with that fuel from the planes obviously melted that steel. And I think, if I recall the numbers correctly, steel can absorb up to 750 some odd degrees, whereas this product is over 1,500. So those, from a practical perspective, cost less, stronger, and and unfortunately in this day and age, we have to be somewhat concerned about if there's a significant major crazy event that happens, how do our construction products hold up in those sorts of instances? So we're really excited about this particular product. And in both instances, because this is a financing and innovation conference, the off-takers also want to be strategic partners financially and otherwise. So we're able to overcome the financing challenge, at least for the next stage of development. So all of this work, again, is being supported by our various coalition partners, and I won't restate all of that. But I think that this is another marvelous example of our organization fulfilling our mandate, which is as follows. And we are now, what we're trying to do is accelerate the adoption of this market and getting it out of the traditional 25, 30-year process. I want to make money off this before I'm dead. So we're really excited about the pace at which this is going on, and we're very much in control of our own destiny on both of these developments. And these are just 2 of 5 that we're pretty excited about. So with that, I will end. Thank you.
Excellent, Tom. Tom, anybody has any? Yeah, we have a great panel. They cover everything. All right, thank you. Thanks, Tom.
And Jim will be up next to talk about the innovation culture and everything out there in just north of LA and Boston.
Okay. And that's over here. So you guys will have to forgive me a little bit for the fact that I sent a PDF, or I sent a PDF, not a PowerPoint. But what I thought I would do, I would start by just giving you a brief introduction of who I am, what my partners do, and what we're up to these days. So as was relayed, I started off my career in project finance, working for First Boston in New York. So I come basically at all projects from a project finance perspective. And fundamentally, project finance is driven by fixed inputs, taking risk on conversion, and then fixed offtakes. I've actually worked on a bunch of coal gasification facilities in Wyoming early in my career, so I basically come at the entire world of carbon and carbon innovation from the perspective of hydrocarbons are one of the greatest things known to man. And they made this country like the most amazing place in the world. But we have recently discovered that one of the byproducts of that, like we had with mercury and other lower particulates, has turned out to be something that's pretty dangerous. And so, as my partners and I, we ran 3 funds for about 10 years, focused mainly on the energy build-up, so wind and solar on the electricity side. And it became quite apparent to us in and around about 2008, 2009, that the fundamental issue driving forward was going to be the amount of CO2 that comes off the various hydrocarbon processes in which we engage, whether that's power generation, fuels, or the petrochemical business. And when you start to see it through that lens, and you dig through, we'll go through some of the numbers here, it becomes very apparent that it is a very, very big problem. But like all very big problems that present themselves in the world, it also represents probably the biggest opportunity that I've ever seen in my life. I will tell you that the first time just a really quick story, the first time I installed a server for my first software company was in 1996, and I'd come out of the power business, and I stood in this gigantic row of servers in Irvine, California, and I thought to myself, if the internet gets this big, the implications for the coal and natural gas business are going to be beyond our wildest dreams. Because if you think about it from a systems level perspective, and you think back, all those electrons that are being consumed by Facebook and Amazon all have direct implications back into the energy grid, and we burn hydrocarbons to do that, and it never really left me. So what my partners and I are doing at this point is, based on the last 15 years of literally taking technologies and scaling them up, we've scaled up the largest concentrated solar power plant in the world. It's actually in Tonopah, Nevada, where we spun technologies directly out of the UTC Corporation. We've scaled up a company that's actually in Nevada that takes municipal solid waste and gasifies it directly into CO and hydrogen, and then uses Fischer-Tropsch to convert that back into a biocrude, and then we upgrade it and sell it to airplanes. So I've got sort of an entire career of sort of taking technologies that are early on and pushing them all the way through, whether that's raising money individual, project by project, or backing management teams or otherwise to do it. This is basically what we do. So what are we doing today, and why am I here? This is a company, a platform company that my partners and I are actually out financing, which I think is actually quite germane to what's going on here. The fundamental issue that we see right now in the entire CO2 value chain is a lack of development skill. The reality is the chemistry for this stuff, in our opinion, is actually not that hard. You go out and talk to people about the chemistry. The chemistry is difficult, but pulling things together and integrating, taking CO2 and getting it off the stack, getting it out of the atmosphere, and then bringing it on and creating a value-added product, and then figuring out which parties to sell to and how much they'll pay for that and all the rest of that, and then ultimately pulling together the project financing is the difficult part, and that's fundamentally a development activity. And so what we're doing these days is we are launching a company called C4 Composites, and you're actually going to hear Tom talk about this. There are a number of opportunities that we've looked at. But it starts with fundamentally that the rate of CO2 emissions, and I'm also going to tell you some stuff today I think that maybe a little bit, they sound a little bit like a downer at the beginning, But I think from a Wyoming perspective, the opportunities are sort of beyond imagination in some regards. So it starts with, we basically reached a place where CO2 in the atmosphere is an unsustainable thing. We're going to have to do something about that. The rest of the world's moving there. We're moving there. And the key part of this, though, is that it's got to be market-based solutions. I've been around long enough, and I think everybody else in this room has been around long enough to see that cap and trade or global taxation or CDM systems or what California is doing with the low carbon fuel standard, they sort of work, but markets take off when there's a fundamental underpinning of profitability. And until you reach that inflection point, markets can only get so big. And so you've got to basically come up with a way to do that. So this is just a really quick slide that I showed people that I think is really important when you think about CO2 and what it means. Everybody's seen the chart on the left, and frankly, it's a bit of fear-mongering, but it's sort of saying, look, we've got all the CO2 in the atmosphere, what are we going to do about it, blah, blah, blah. See it in the New York Times, see it in the Wall Street Journal, all very interesting, but as we heard before, pointing out a problem without a solution is just complaining. So that's nice. But this is a very telling slide. And if you take nothing away from today, remember this slide. That black dot is the total amount of CO2 that the United States, or globally, we're putting up expressing gigatons. We're putting up about 9 gigatons of anthropogenic CO2 a year globally. The big red one is how much CO2 is already in the atmosphere. It's 2,800 gigatons. So the message from this and the opportunity is, if we turned off every coal plant, every natural gas power plant, every petrochemical, every ethanol plant globally tomorrow morning, and we went to zero carbon, that legacy is still up there, and we're going to have to deal with it. And so there's a very interesting problem that has to be tackled around that, which is how are we going to build an industry to extract that CO2? So there's two parts of the problem. One is, how do we take the existing stuff, the coal, the nat gas, the combined cycle plants across the country and around the world, and how do we make sure that those stop producing CO2? It's a huge problem. Wyoming's got it, Washington's got it, we've got it all over the country, the Chinese have it. But we have a secondary problem, which is literally 2 orders of magnitude bigger, which is what are we going to do with the legacy? And said another way, that carbon is a quantification of industrialization that we all enjoy, and it's great. I mean, I don't want to go back to anybody else does, but we're going to have to deal with that. And so the fundamental thing we're thinking about is how do we build technologies and processes that can extract that CO2 directly from the atmosphere and turn them into value-added products. And it turns out that A, it's an enormous reindustrialization story for the United States, and it's a really big opportunity for Wyoming because I'm going to take you to the punchline. Turns out natural gas has a huge role to play in all of this. So I'm going to dispense with a lot of this, but basically this is sort of, why care about this, right? It's because it's starting to have direct economic impact across a number of very fundamental industries. And you can argue about this, but basically whether you look at food, water, coastal real estate, ecosystems, or extreme weather events, you're starting to see all of the, whether it was Irma or Sandy or otherwise, you're starting to basically see insurance companies, as a very specific example, pulling back from insuring coastal real estate because they get hit too much, and they're starting to say, okay, we have to deal with this. And so the reason, again, to get in front of CO2 opportunity is that there's very large markets driving this, that if you can get in front of them and offer that product into them, you can make a lot of money. Okay, so really quickly, and I think for you, when you think about innovation, or when we think about innovation, what we try to do is try to segment out markets and then basically look at, how quickly are these things going to come to market, how valuable are they, size and scale, all the rest of that. If you basically go across and you say, look, we've got 3 sort of opportunities within CO2. You can either adapt, which is to say, what, we're not going to worry about it, we're just going to adapt and whatever happens. I think we're starting to see the front end of how severe that can be, depending on where you live. Whether it's, we have a place in Ketchum, Idaho, a lot of fires. You can argue a lot about what the source of all this is. But the reality is, we think it's big enough. The second piece, which is reduce emissions, and this is the ITC and the stuff that's going on here is a huge role to play and very important, right? Getting down total emissions, the marginal emission, right? The marginal emission is a very big deal, and I think you're seeing that both on the coal side, but you're also seeing that on the new build side with wind and solar, right? One way to address this roll-off is to basically say we're going to build a zero carbon electron. Energy efficiency in electric vehicles, and then our view is that you're going to have to get into the removal ultimately of CO2 directly from the atmosphere. And this is different than taking it off the stack in that it's already up there as opposed to avoiding having it going up. By the way, just to be clear, we think that both are absolutely necessary. You're not going to get it. You're going to have to take it out of the atmosphere, but you're also going to have to make sure that the marginal emissions stop. So what we're focused on and trying to drive innovation around is this sort of third category, which is basically combining technologies to get to value-added carbon products. So really quickly, and I think you can hear this a lot of these technologies are actually at a pretty good state of maturation from a TRL perspective. So you basically have three categories. You have capture, conversion, and commercialization. Again, the piece that we spent a lot of time focusing on is looking at the economics of capture and then trying to wed that to the economics of conversion. And again, the way that we looked at this is very, very similar, by the way, to the way that the solar industry began in 04 and 05. You had a lot of componentry guys. All of them were very technical, weren't looking at the total supply chain. And eventually you had big integrators come in, like Solar City and other people who realized, if I can offer that, basically a customer doesn't care about a panel. What a customer cares about is lower electricity costs. And so if I can put that together and offer a commodity product that's equal to or less than on a quality basis and a pricing basis, then I really have something. And I think the big element of innovation, which I think you're going to hear over and over again here, is these are commodity markets and no one cares. You can survey people to your blue in the face about doing good for the world, but when you actually ask them to buy, if it's not the cheapest product, they won't. And I think there's been a lot of discussion in our country about we ought to do this because it's the right thing to do. Our experience has been nobody pays for that. They pay for that when you come in and offer a comparable product at the same or less than price. And if you get paid for the carbon later on in the option value, terrific. If you can't, you shouldn't do it. Because ultimately then you're betting on a regulatory outcome. And, Democrats win sometimes, Republicans win other times. And if you're betting on that, it's a bad business. So that's our view of it. So, again, we're focusing very much on capture and conversion right now, and then moving on to commercialization. Just a very quick, I'm a big believer in trying to sort of keep these types of things simple. And again, I think this is repetitive of a lot of the stuff that you've heard. Basically, there's a way to get to these value-added products, and it's effectively direct air capture. I actually don't have taking stuff on the stack because that's not what we're doing. Again, not that I have a problem with it, but that's just not our focus. So taking direct air capture, and then basically, because basically what you need if you want to get to a product, you got to get to CO and hydrogen. This is sort of petrochemical 101, right? And so you got to get that CO2 and you got to get that hydrogen from somewhere, and there's basically a couple pathways. One is that you can use electrolysis, which is to take water, you run electricity through water, which is through high school chemistry, we all did it, you get your hydrogen, and then you get your CO2 from somewhere, and then you basically use that, you have to have something to do the reduction reaction, which is more electricity. And then you can basically get to all these different products, whether it's concrete, tires, carbon fiber, steel, industrial chemicals. The other thing that we spend a lot of time looking at, and this kind of goes to the whole thing about constructing how you think about what type of carbon you're capturing, is that there's a duration to sequestration, right? If I make soda pop, somebody drinks it, they burp it, it's right back up. If I make solid carbon products like a nanotube, they can effectively sequester that CO2 indefinitely. And so there's a question as you move along that continuum around how long do I want to sequester something and how how much can I get paid for it. So we tend to think of things on 3 axes, which is how long can I sequester it, what do I get paid to sequester it, and how much does it cost to sequester it. The second piece that's very interesting about this, and while I was sitting here reading on my phone, because I didn't actually know this, but there are other pathways, and solid carbon products, who we know pretty well, is actually one of the groups that's using this, is you can get a reduction in action using CH4. And one of the things that's fascinating about reduction reactions, right, if you think about it, that if you want to get a hydrogen and you want to get it from water, you got to expend an enormous amount of capital. You got to build an electrolyzer, you got to build a power plant, and you have all of the efficiency losses through that power plant. You got to burn something, you got to run the turbines, you got losses all the way through, and then you got a big electrolyzer to just get your hydrogen. But if Mother Nature gives us a CH4, which is effectively 100 million plus years of gravity and sunlight, the amount, basically the compacting nature of that over time is incredibly valuable. And as long as you don't combust it, you use it for its chemical energy, not for its combustion energy, you can get to these types of products. So effectively what you can do is you can take CO2 out of the atmosphere and you can combine it with CH4 and you can get to basically inert products or solid carbon products. Now here's the interesting part. Wyoming has, I knew this, but I was totally on. Wyoming has about 20,000, call it 20,400 BCF, or 6.6% of all natural gas reserves in the United States of America. And I know, because I was a gas trader, that we have a huge gas glut, and it's only getting bigger because fracking, it's a great thing, we found a lot of stuff. But increasingly, as we're using less and less of it to generate electrons, the question becomes, what are we going to do with all of that? And the big story in innovation that places like Wyoming and other states that have frankly been the recipients of large gas reserves is that there's an opportunity with CO2 to reposition Wyoming as a place that basically produces the underlying feedstocks for the global construction industry. So you can get the steel, you can get the carbon, all the rest. Now, why is that interesting? Because if you project out a little bit and you say, all of the people around the globe are all moving to cities and they're building buildings. And when they build all that concrete and they build all that steel, what do? They emit CO2. So the real question becomes, how do we align growth globally with lower carbon outcomes? And the beauty of this is that using CH4 that we have in our country, which we can move around better than anywhere else in the world, we have an opportunity to basically use that CO2 and use CO2, combine it with natural gas, and get to the precursors of all of these things cheaper than any place else on the planet. I mean, I can tell you, we know this stuff cold. Landed gas prices anywhere else in the world are at least 2x what they are in the United States. And there's no chance that's going to change very soon. We have gas infrastructure, and we have way more TCF than we need. So, moving on, and again, this is sort of a question of, I don't want to, I try to sort of keep this pretty straightforward. Where can CO2 go, right? And this goes to my earlier point, which is, if you want to think of the x-axis, or excuse me, the y-axis as sort of being duration, you get down to fuels, which is about $2 trillion a year industry, and then you move on up into specialty chemicals. Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, sorry, but I get off. One more time. Yeah. Oh no, go. Keep going. One of the fundamental questions around innovation opportunities: how big is the market? Can you actually take all that CO2 out of the atmosphere and actually get it into markets that are big enough that they can absorb it, both from a dollar volume and CO2 volume? And if you do that, how long is it going to stay sequestered? Well, again, keeping it at a relatively high level here, CO2 can be used more in the form of CO, right? But in fuels, specialty chemicals, and materials. And all of these markets, so if you do basically sort of an energy balance on all of this, what you see is that there's an opportunity to take out, we think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 maybe 15 to 18 gigatons per annum if you scale this all the way up globally, which is an enormous number and won't happen tomorrow. We're talking 20, 30 years. But it does show you that there's an opportunity. Again, if Wyoming can get in front of this and be the center of innovation for this type of stuff, it has a global implication because we've got cheap gas and we can basically pull CO2 out of the atmosphere anywhere we want. And that's a pretty powerful thing. Okay, so you're all up, so if you okay, so one of the things about this slide that again is designed to talk about from a sort of an economic perspective is if you actually look at the amount of CO2 that these markets can capture and use, and then the gross dollar volume. You're talking about some of the largest markets on the planet. And again, the story here and the opportunity here is that states that have traditionally relied on coal and natural gas, as our view internally is that batteries are coming for the coal business. Just like, or they're coming for the nat gas business. The gas guys drove the coal guys out of business, and batteries plus solar is going to be next. And I know that's maybe not a super popular view, but that's our view of what's going to happen. And that's definitely what's happening internationally. And so the question becomes, you've got all this resource that people don't want to use, what can you use it for? And the answer is transition into construction businesses and effectively create, in the future, the built environment will be a CO2 sink. And I know that's a little bit maybe Star Wars, but it's all chemically totally possible. And again, we are the low-cost producer of natural gas globally, and there's nothing that's going to change that anytime soon. And as long as we have that natural gas, we should focus on using that natural gas and buying the CO2 and use that as a lever to get into markets that we don't currently dominate. I mean, I'm talking basically the nat gas people and folks in Wyoming have an opportunity to go after the steel and concrete and these construction industries because they're going to have to. Now, this is a very interesting slide because you might ask yourself then, okay, well, if we're going to use electrical inputs, and again, we've looked at this analysis in some detail, if you're going to have electrical inputs for all of this, at what price per megawatt hour does that whole equation start to balance out? And it turns out it's around $40 a megawatt hour, which is about the cost of fully amortized coal. But it's also about the cost of solar at this point. The latest solar auctions in Mexico went off at $33. Now, it's a diurnal cycle, so it's got issues with supplying stuff. But if you start doing DC plants, right, the losses when you go back to AC from DC on a solar plant are almost 30%. So if you're pricing solar right now around $40 and you put your PV plant next to your manufacturing facility, you can multiply times 27. And so the news is, going forward, solar's getting cheaper, and when it does, it will be the electrical input. But all is not lost, again, because you're going to need natural gas. And the story here is that natural gas and renewables going forward are going to be the two things that basically work, because natural gas provides the chemical input to take the stuff that's in the sky and turn it into value-added products in a way that wind and solar will never do. It'll never, from a capital cost perspective, it will never fly. So, you don't have to be, if you're in the electricity business, you don't have to be worried about whether or not it's getting cheap in solar. We talked about this earlier, and I'll skip over this, but a lot of these technologies have reached a place where they are technically viable. Again, very quickly, you heard before, Carbon Engineering is a company that's involved in taking CO2 directly out of the atmosphere. There's another company that's controlled. Actually, so Bill Gates is an investor in this. So the common theme here is lots of billionaires like these types of things, and are willing to take the very over-the-horizon risk, which is good, because it benefits all of us. You have Carbon Engineering, you have another company called Global Thermostat that's backed by a guy named Andrew Bronfman, who's a Canadian billionaire, who's related to these things. Climeworks is a Swiss company. Both Climeworks and I'm on the board of Carbon Engineering, although I own no stock, and I think it's something that's absolutely necessary for the overall build-out of this ecosystem. solid carbon products you've heard about. There's graphene technologies. There's a whole list of these guys, whether you're looking at the carbon, the carbon XPRIZE or otherwise. But again, our view is that going forward, what's required is people that are going to integrate these technologies. None of them on a standalone basis we think makes perfect sense. So you're going to have to find somebody who's either stripping CO2 from stack and then going on to something else, or they're coming straight out of the air and doing it. But these are, and again, I was just really trying to get a sense of what's out there. But the good news is a lot of these technologies are really, and the really good news is a lot of these guys kind of got their start pre-08, and if they're still around, they're real entrepreneurs. Because if you made it through 08 and the last 10 years, you're pretty much a bare knuckle entrepreneur. Again, the industry that we find most interesting right now, and this is also sort of designed to sort of give you a sense of how much growth is potentially in the CO2 innovation sort of ecosystem, if you will. Power plants and wind had about 35 billion go in to high growth solar, wind, and batteries. You can see what's going on. The CAGRs in wind and solar in the United States are easily 5x natural gas. I don't even know when the coal plants are going to get permitted or built this year. I think it's 0. We're pretty close to it. Right, so you got an industry that only took in 35 billion, which relatively speaking is not a lot of capital, and has had enormous growth. Transportation, that's really that's Elon Musk. But again, $12 billion, and yesterday GM announced that they're going to do, they're going to have a 100% electric fleet going forward. And Tesla's going to have a truck, right? They're going to launch in 6 months. They're going to have a truck that's basically going to be equivalent of a Ford F-150, which I'm pretty sure you see. But the chemicals business and the materials business is largely underinvested. So when we think about innovation, and again, if you use that paradigm to take the CO2 off the stack or out of the air, our view is go to chemicals, go to materials, and go to fuels. Because that's where the highest value-added products are at this point in time. It's a great truism because I've been both in the electricity and the fuels business. On a BTU basis, you always get 2x for fuel over electricity because it has stored energy value. You can move it around and you can trade it and it doesn't go down. And in the electrons business, you gotta use it or get rid of it. I mean, setting aside things like pump storage and all the rest. I'm running a long time here. I'm going to just quickly give you a very quick example. We're actually working on a series of projects, which again, I think people have already sort of touched on this. But as an example, we're basically we've already launched a development company, raised several $million on this idea, essentially working with solid carbon products or a couple other guys that we like, and carbon engineering, and we're going to do, my partners and I are going to do all the capital raising. We're doing all the front end engineering and design work. I've worked with Fluor, I've worked with Black & Veatch, I know Carrere, but basically this model of effectively figuring out, and a lot of these technologies, they require scaling. You got to do it yourself. I mean, just straight up. You can't hand that off to other people because you have to control it to make sure you get the right outcome. But building and developing companies, taking these types of technologies, combining them, and then bringing them all the way to markets. And again, driving back towards the project financeable outcome, which is fixed input, conversion risk, and fixed offtake. And if you can do that, and Wyoming and folks that are in Wyoming can sort of take that model and move towards those markets, I think I've never seen anything. I think it's way bigger than the internet, because how we manage the CO2, that legacy number, is just enormous, and it's going to be a struggle, but big opportunity. And again, I won't sort of spend a lot of time on this, but just one last thing, because it's actually interesting. We did a fair amount of looking at this. What we do a lot when we look at these types of commodity businesses, we just basically saying, if I wanted to do a CO2 to carbon black facility, given where the technology is today, given where electricity prices are today, what kind of assumptions and what kind of things do I have to be thinking about, right? Right now, carbon black is trades between about $1,000 to $2,500 a ton, depending on gradation and quality of it. And this is this whole business of is it dropping, right? Higher guys have different specs than others. But right now, we think that given about $40 input price and $3 in MMBTU gas, and if you look at the forward curve, the Henry Hub or otherwise, that's a pretty reasonable assumption, particularly the strain. And as you get further into the Northern Rockies, kind of hard to transport gas. As you go to a first commercial plant, and essentially, at CO2, that's about $300 a ton captured. And as you start to come down those curves, what you see is that, with technology that exists today and not crazy assumptions, you're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years the opportunity, again, to take CO2 out of the atmosphere or off the stack and turn it into value-added products and bring it into wholesale markets that are the inputs for the from everything from aerospace. We've had detailed conversations with Boeing and the other airframe guys. And I think one of the most exciting things we just heard about this, one of the most exciting things about this is that if you can get CO2 and make it as one of the precursors to moving into things like carbon fiber, you have this amazing sort of beneficial cycle, which is as we have more carbon fiber, the price drops, more people use that carbon fiber, all of the things that we do get lighter, right? And as they get lighter, we use less hydrocarbon, which means we slow down the rate of CO2 coming off. And so you get these amazing cycles that start. And so, maybe in summary, I'm really excited about what's going on in Wyoming and the opportunities here because so much of this opportunity rests on low-cost gas. And maybe to conclude, I actually find that one of the great ironies of my adult life is that all of the carbon that we burned that went up, we're now going to use that same carbon molecule to take it all back down and sequester it. So hydrocarbon people are going to win again. And I live in California, and if you say that, you'll get really upset. Right? But if you look at the math, low-cost hydrocarbons, thought about in a thoughtful way, combine the CO2 from the atmosphere or from stack, is the other side of the coin, which is even if we stop making any type of carbon that comes off of our processes, we still have a legacy piece that we have to deal with, and this is key to the solution. So, with that, thank you.
That's very exciting. We get to answer questions for Jim?
Yeah, Jim, just a question. What's happening in the construction industry to develop this opportunity in parallel with what you're saying?
So it's so the answer is right now, not an enormous amount because the markets are slow. But it's actually interesting. It turns out that fire rating, which you touched on, fire rating in the construction industry is one of the biggest things. That they'd rather take something that's very durable in fire over something that might melt. So there's a lot of what I would characterize as material characterization going on. They're basically taking this stuff. They're taking these nanotubes and they're taking fiber and they're sort of saying, okay, how durable is it in fire? The other thing that's a really big concern, which again, I have an undergraduate degree in philosophy and mathematics, and I got B's in organics chemistry, so take it for what it is. There are people who are much smarter than I am who have real concerns about aerosol, you can say the right word, but basically when you get below about 5 or 10 nanometers and things come back out there's a question about, could that be dangerous to people in terms of getting it in your lungs and otherwise. And so there's a lot of people in the construction industry who see the benefit. The strength to weight ratio of carbon fiber is like 100 versus steel. So there are a lot of people who are looking at it saying, look, if I want to build very, very tall buildings, this would be a terrific material. So there's a realization of the strength stuff, but there are people sort of struggling around how to characterize the fire elements, and then some of the stuff. If it does come out a solution, what do you do with it?
So just a point, because I'm witnessing this emergence of a paradigm shift in use of forest products. associated with construction and huge buildings, and watching that ecosystem emerge. And so you're starting to see architect schools coming in and departments and universities that are focusing on, so they're starting to bounce off each other to develop greater interest in that. So I'm just wondering.
It's actually interesting. One of the conversations that got me really spinning on this was that I have a very good friend who's a junior architect, Frank Geary, who's this sort of famous Los Angeles architect who built like the Disney Hall and all that stuff. And they're very big into sort of, what kind of interesting materials can we build. And the whole question on urban density, right, and sprawl is a big issue, right? Are we going to just sprawl forever? What are we going to do? And so this idea of could we build, I had a dinner party with these guys, and like, could you build a 500-floor building? And the answer is, yeah, you can, right? But you're going to have to use different materials. And as soon as you start using those different materials, it also turns out that in construction, as soon as you go above about 29 or 30 feet, the requirements completely change, because if something's more than 30 feet up and it comes off, it's a whole different ballgame. Like if it just falls on the sidewalk, no problem, but if it's 300 floors up. So I think that's all going to move in parallel with this type of stuff, but there's nothing about it, I think from an engineering perspective, and anybody who's smarter than me is going to say, but you're sort of challenging like a second law of thermodynamics or something. Yeah.
So, the chart that you were showing, your demonstration plan, if you go to commercial, your capture cost from air, CO2 capture cost is like $140 a ton?
So our view on...
Approximately?
Yeah, so our view today is that today's carbon capture costs are probably in the 350 to 400 range, and for the market to really take off, it's got to hit sub 150.
So that's from air, capturing CO2 from air. So today, if you want to capture CO2 from a power plant and say you pay $100 a ton, that's an amazing business.
Yeah.
So why don't you guys focus on that? Because capturing from air is much more expensive. You're saying.
So I think it's a good question. And frankly, right, you can get pipeline grade CO2 from a bunch of MLPs. Like it's not, you can get it cheaper than that, right? I can buy it from Magellan for $30, right, in West Texas, right? So the reason we're focused on ambient air extraction is because of that first slide I showed you, which is the stuff that's coming off the stacks. It's a necessary. I guess it's pretty specific. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient to stabilize the climate. Somebody's got to go fix a piece of what's up there, and that's not for everybody, but that's where we're focused. And I will also tell you that I think I can build projects right now, even at today's prices, even at $300 a ton, by blending a mix of blacks and specialty blacks and smaller amounts of carbon, like nanotubes, that you can get project returns that people will buy it all day. So why not go to the end game and solve a big problem if you think you can do it? It's just a style, that's all.
Yeah, my thinking is if you can actually have a big project where you can actually show this is working, the basic difficulty that at least you know more than I do, breaking the CO2 bond to getting to actual carbon. Carbon Johnny, everybody agrees, it's great. But in breaking that bond is very energy intensive.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the reasons that we ended up with the whole discussion around methane, CH4, is that when you go through the capital and operating analysis of trying to get hydrogen from any other source other than natural gas, it's really, really hard to justify.
Question in the back.
Yeah, so Jim, how do you think about biology as a direct air capture technique versus some of these chemical approaches?
So the short answer is I hate biology. I hate bugs. I think that we've lost so much money. We tried with like algae and a bunch of other stuff early on. We just got crushed. We lost like 40 to 50 million bucks on two deals. I'm a bad biologist. We're not good at it. It seems really hard. Thermochemical is easier. I'm not saying it can't happen. We've shown systematically over the last 10 years that we're horrible. So we don't do it. But that doesn't mean it's not possible.
You can go online and look, you see the dirty dozen of Apple's technologies. You probably run into them.
Well, we were in something.
You were there.
Like last month. Yeah, so we're just not good at it.
So, Jim, when will we see these things start becoming visible in the market? That's,
2021. I mean, right, look, if you just sort of back it out and say, if you take a DAC, a direct air capture unit, and you take one of the technologies that we're talking about, somebody's going to have to come in, get licenses from both those guys, find the development capital to do the front-end engineering and design work, do the piloting at whatever scale, and then ultimately go and sell offtake, and then they're going to have to get project financed, and then they're probably a 2-year build cycle. So if you're moving, it's 2018 now, so maybe the end of 2022, when you're moving.
And you're referring, Jim, to the direct air capture source.
Oh yeah, no. I think stuff off the stack much sooner.
Yeah, we expect that we'll be accelerating the carbon black and carbon nanotube marketplace on the CO2 capture piece off the stack more quickly than that. But I think that will also help to accelerate what Jim's trying to do, because that will also demonstrate commercial adoption and the economic piece on the conversion piece anyway. So it's not a mutually exclusive exercise, right?
Don't get me wrong. I actually think that taking stuff off the stack is a much nearer term thing to do. It improves efficacy. The concentrations are higher. There's a bunch of reasons that it's better. I mean, in terms of just sort of doing it right now.
And the more that we can do between now and 2021, 2022, hopefully there'll be a little incrementally less for you guys to tackle by then.
Right.
Well, we're going to get Charlie up to about 15, 20, 17 minutes left. Charlie, go ahead.
Thanks very much. And thanks to the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority. I had the pleasure of being at the last meeting, or the meeting in Laramie back in March. And so I will be brief and allow you all to get out and enjoy this beautiful weather. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Wyoming iPark. The I in iPark stands for Inspiring Industrial Innovation, and a lot of the things that Jason, Tom, Jim spoke about are the types of things that we'd like to encourage at the iPark. Here's just a little bit about where we are. We're just north of Sheridan, about 6 miles. And Sheridan is in the center of the state, up towards the Montana border, for those of you who might not know. And the site of the iPark is on part of the property which is associated with the 15,000-acre mineral reserve. And it actually is the site of 5 old coal mine towns, Acme, Monarch, Cooley, and others used to be sited in this area. And so it was an active coal mining area from the latter part of the 19th century to about the 1930s, when the last demise of the coal industry occurred. Locomotives shifted off of using coal to using diesel electric. We're sort of focused on exploiting sort of a modern version of the coal tree. This is actually a page from a standard 1923 industry textbook, which sort of diagrammed all the various uses of coal that were known at that time. And as you can see, basically coal is sort of the fundament, if you will, of all types of different products, which were commercially valuable and known techniques were known how to extract those materials at that time. With the advent of greater supply of crude oil in the decades that followed, the focus really was on using cat crackers and things to exploit all those minerals from petroleum. But the technology for using coal for that was well known and well established a long time ago. We're primarily focused on what we sort of call the modern coal product, which is principally addressing advanced materials for advanced manufacturing. And that's what we think of with the foster at the iPark. And we have a part of that park which is the carbon advanced materials
but it's capable of producing, in addition to a whole range of chemicals, activated carbon, rare earth elements, which is something that EGL and DOE are very interested in others. Carbon fiber, which we discussed already, is something graphene, graphite, carbon nanotubes, a whole variety of types of products. So essentially the focus is taking a carbon sink and turning it back into a carbon sink, and doing that in an environmentally positive way. And as Jim mentioned, the big markets for this really are the building and construction industry in Central area. And whether it's using carbon elements to make rebar or other types of pavings or other types of materials, that's really where the volumes are. I would say the volumes for carbon nanotubes and things of that nature are rather small, but the volumes of building materials are quite large. So the overall project, which is historically shared, is the iPark. And it's basically advanced materials manufacturing is fully focused on using really coal as a feedstock. Although, Jim, whether it's natural gas or coal or whatever, I think at one point you really have to be agnostic about what's the best here. We simply happen to have $1.2 billion coal reserve, which is the largest privately owned coal reserve west of the Mississippi at this location. So it's an ideal place to do so. The Carbon Advanced Materials Center will be focused on advanced materials, and we're fortunate enough to be with a whole host of good partners, including WRI. But we were fortunate to be one of the participants in the recent deal for lightweight automobile parts, which is simply an indication of the fact that we're very supportive of this type of technology and advancements to it. The planning for the site is in the works, as is the permitting, and this is sort of a design for what we will be doing. All the companies that were indicated earlier in Tom's address and Jim's come to fruition funding. We'd like for them to come here. We'd like for them to come to Wyoming, and we think this is the perfect place for them. The overall size of the acreage, 15,000 acres, is at roughly twice the size of the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, where I spent a lot of time. And the Research Triangle Park started with one very small 2,000 square foot building in 1959. It's now a host of more than 3,600 different companies. And so it's from a small seedling, hopefully something will grow. And that's really the end of my presentation in terms of what we're doing. And happy to entertain any questions. We're happy to let everyone go out and enjoy this beautiful afternoon.
Questions for Charlie? Charlie mentioned the Department of Energy selected a proposal to study making carbon fibers from various precursor materials, including biomass, biosugars, slurry oils, and coal tars, and to evaluate how those different chemistries and formulations affect the physical properties of carbon fibers. So we strive to get to a $5 per pound cost goal to get pervasive use to the automotive industry for lightweight vehicles and dramatically lower the emissions and fuel consumption. And Jim, Tom, we have an industry advisory panel to perform. That would be something that would be worthwhile.